A whole American town vanished in 1923, not from a hurricane, not from fire, not from disease, but because of a single lie, a lie so explosive it erased Rosewood, Florida, from a map. This wasn't chaos. This was an accident. It was planned, deliberate, and for more than 70 years, it was buried. Rosewood wasn't just a town. It was a thriving black community built from nothing after the Civil War. Families owned land. Businesses flourished. People believed they had finally found safety, dignity, and freedom. And then, in January 1923, everything changed. A rumor turned into rage. A lie became a weapon. And an entire community was hunted, burned, and erased while the world looked away. This is the truth America tried to silence. This is Rosewood, the story they never wanted you to hear. Almost no one talked about Rosewood for more than 70 years. There were no documentaries, no memorials, no official investigations, just silence. Survivors were warned never to speak. Families scattered across the country, pretending the town never existed. But history doesn't disappear just because people try to bury it. And today, we're going to uncover what really happened, how a thriving black community was erased, why the truth was hidden for decades, and how the survivors finally forced America to acknowledge Rosewood. To understand Rosewood, you must first understand the era. It was the early 1900s. The Civil War was over, technically. Slavery was outlawed, technically. But the South still operated under a system designed to keep black Americans poor, voiceless, and afraid. Jim Crow was not a set of laws. It was a system of control. Segregation, economic oppression, violence, and intimidation kept millions from exercising their rights. But Rosewood was different. A black success story. Rosewood was a predominantly black town in Levy County, Florida. Families there bought land, something many black Americans were denied. They ran general stores, turpentine mills, blacksmith shops, a school, a church. They hunted, they farmed, they owned, they prospered. Nearby was Sumner, a mostly white town. The two towns coexisted, but not peacefully. There was resentment, suspicion, unspoken tension. Rosewood represented something many white supremacists deeply opposed: black independence and black economic success. And all it took was one accusation, one unverified claim, to ignite that hatred. New Year's Day, 1923. In Sumner, a white woman named Fannie Taylor reported that she had been attacked by an unknown black man. There was no evidence, no confirmed suspect, nothing but her word in a violently racist era. Within hours, white mobs, some local, some from nearby counties, began forming. What followed next was not an investigation. It was not a legal process. It was a hunt. But here's what many people don't know. Years later, witnesses and historians revealed another version of the story. One that indicates Fannie Taylor may have lied to cover up an incident involving a white man she knew. Not a stranger, not a black man, and certainly no one from Rosewood. But by the time this truth surfaced decades later, it was far too late. As the rumor spread, the mob grew. Men arrived carrying guns, torches, and rage fueled by racial hatred. Cars poured in from nearby towns. The sheriff's office did not protect Rosewood. Nobody tried to stop the escalating violence. The mob believed the suspect was hiding in Rosewood. No proof, no witness, not even a name, just an excuse. The attack begins. The mob marched toward Rosewood, targeting homes and property. Black families hid. Some fled into the surrounding woods. Others sought refuge with neighbors. One house that became central to the story was a home of Sarah Carrier, a respected resident of Rosewood. What happened there over the next hours would become the defining event of the tragedy. Inside the Carrier house were several family members and children. Outside was a mob demanding justice. Shots were fired. The panic inside the home was unimaginable. Confusion, fear, children crying, adults praying and trying to protect their families. No one inside expected to survive. In the chaos, some people, both attackers and defenders, lost their lives. But the exact details remained debated because witnesses were terrified to speak for decades. What is clear is this: the Carrier House incident transformed a hunt into a full-scale destruction of Rosewood. The mob claimed this confrontation proved their suspicion, even though it did nothing of the sort. But they now had justification, at least in their minds, to destroy the entire town. For nearly a week, Rosewood was under siege. Families fled into swamps. Children were separated from parents. People hid in wells, forests, and abandoned buildings. Some white residents of nearby towns secretly helped black families escape, risking their own safety. One railroad conductor named J.W. Wright courageously smuggled survivors out of the county on trains, hiding them as best as he could. The courage of these helpers is an important part of the story. Proof that even in the darkest moments, humanity can shine through. But make no mistake, Rosewood fell. Homes were burned. Businesses were looted or destroyed. Property records disappeared. Everything the town had built, decades of effort, vanished. Once the violence ended, nothing remained. Black residents were displaced permanently. Many never returned. For generations, families lived with trauma, silence, fear. Some survivors did not tell their children until they were old. Some never spoke of it again. No one was arrested. No one was convicted. And for decades, the state of Florida refused to acknowledge what happened. Rosewood was literally wiped off the map. Why did Rosewood disappear from the national story? Because people were afraid. Survivors feared retaliation. Officials feared exposure. Local governments avoided any discussion that might lead to consequences or compensation. And the nation? America was never eager to confront racial violence head-on. For 71 years, Rosewood was a whispered memory, until one family broke the silence. In the late 1980s, Rosewood survivor Aunt Minnie Lee Langley and her family began pushing for a full investigation. Their testimony, along with accounts from other survivors, caught the attention of journalists, historians, and eventually the Florida government. The state commissioned an official study. For the first time, Rosewood was thoroughly researched and documented. The investigation confirmed the core truth. Rosewood was destroyed because of a lie, and the state failed to protect its own citizens. In 1994, more than 7 decades after the tragedy, Florida passed the Rosewood Compensation Bill, awarding financial reparations to the remaining survivors. It was one of the first times in American history that the government compensated black victims of racial violence. The survivors finally received recognition. Not enough to rebuild what they lost, but enough to prove that their story mattered. Rosewood is more than a tragedy. It is a symbol of what black communities were capable of building after slavery, and what systemic racism tried to destroy. It represents economic independence, community unity, resilience, suppressed history, and perhaps most importantly, the courage to tell the truth, even when others want it buried. Today, descendants continue to honor the memory of Rosewood. Documentaries, books, and research have revived the story. The town site now includes markers acknowledging what happened. Rosewood is no longer erased. History is not just about the past. It is a mirror. And when we look into the story of Rosewood, we see questions that still matter today. What happens when lies go unchecked? What happens when justice is unequal? What happens when communities are targeted simply for succeeding? Rosewood forces us to remember, to acknowledge, to learn, and to refuse silence. Because silence is how history repeats itself. And remembering is how we break the cycle. This is the story of Rosewood, Florida, a town built by hope, destroyed by hate, and finally reclaimed by the truth. If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Rosewood deserves to be remembered, and so do all the histories America tried to erase. So if you believe these stories matter, hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but so together we can uncover the truths that were buried, honor the voices that were silenced, and make sure these stories never disappear again. Subscribe to join the mission, because remembrance is power, and you're part of it now.